within the company I work, one of the top people came up to me and we were talking about this, that, or whatever, and she was like, you know, what you do really well is you take very complicated things and you simplify them in a way that anybody can understand it. And so that's what I've tried to do with the book is just like, give people some access to some information that can help them on to the course of real success, whatever that is for them.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why? Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with Tullie Bailey. Tullie's a nightclub director and manager and self-described ghetto Tony Robbins. I feel like that's a good spot to stop that intro because I want to hear where that comes from. I want to hear about your background from you, Tullie. I first want to say thank you, though. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for taking the time out. I really do appreciate the time to share with the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, my name's Tullie Bailey. I was born in Grand Junction, Colorado. Um, Kind of the backstory for me, my father passed away when I was very young. Um, at 2 years old, I was the youngest of five. My mom was a single parent with five kids at 23. And so we started at a very steep incline in terms of normal survival. And through that, we had a lot of obstacles, ups and downs, charges and tribulations. I grew up in some really bad neighborhoods. I got in lots of trouble as a young person, in and out of juvenile detention facilities. That kind of landed me as an adult onto an oil and gas drilling rig, which, um, if anybody knows that industry, it's very difficult, very dangerous. But the environment that I came from was no less difficult, and equally dangerous. So, I did that for a number of years and kind of parallel to the oil and gas thing. I also uh, was a budding musician, hip hop artist. I started kind of locally on my days off, which in the drilling industry, it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The 2 weeks on the rig, I'm doing dangerous hard work. And then the 2 weeks I'm off, I started playing shows in and around Denver and then kind of grew a following regionally, then nationally. And at one point, I was touring the world as a musician, kind of on my own. Like I built that myself while still working in the oil and gas industry. We got into a lot of trouble as a young man and went in and out of those things, went onto the rig and just started working. And realized that hard work ethic could get me really anywhere. Working my way up the ranks of the drilling operation while simultaneously building a fan base. Uh, and then, about 10 years into that, I kind of fell out of love with touring and continued working on the rig, which is kind of when I met my now wife. And I started throwing parties locally in Denver, then regionally in Arizona and Denver and New Mexico and throughout Colorado. And through that experience, I kind of fell in love with the nightclub space, which was ultimately the second chapter of my life. I felt like every second that I was on the drilling rig, now that I had discovered this like communal, uh, community driven nightclub world, it was a waste of time. And so ultimately I left the drilling operations as the driller and moved into the nightclub space. I started literally as a coat check person and worked my way up from coat check to bar back to back of house manager to manager of the one venue to manager of two venues to where I sit presently, general manager of four nightclubs in Denver, two being the biggest in the state. And, that's some of the intro. Now, the way that we got to the books, during kind of before COVID, I started looking at, as one would know, the nightclub space, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, a lot of chaos. That was also where I came from in my neighborhood and where I came from in the drilling rig. So it was a challenge I was always facing. And, right before COVID, I kind of decided I wanted to get sober, which I did. And during COVID, one of the things that was interesting to me, like the process of getting sober, was telling the story of who I was and what I was, and kind of led to me writing my first book, which was The Quiet Lessons of an Incredibly Loud Adventure. And that really just told the story of Tullie and what it took for me to, wade through all of that water to get to where I am today. And the book was received well, and people had showed some interest in, my business acumen, how I came to be and succeed and do whatever I want in the arena of business. And the idea of writing a second book that kind of told that story. That's where we are right now.
You finished that up with that's where we are right now. Like that's just a little bit there. That's actually I mean a pretty incredible background and diverse. So I mean back up just a bit. I mean it sounds like you know childhood was hard
Sure.
and almost like you kind of and I feel like I've seen this before. I've probably experienced it some myself, but when you grow up that way, hard almost becomes comfortable. That's like what you're used to. And so you kind of continue to pursue that. And you said you went to the drilling rigs. Um, no.
You almost seek out
Yeah.
difficult situations because that's what you're comfortable with. You put on this rough exterior and you surround yourself with really hard things, challenging things, because you're only comfortable in that environment. The moment you experience an easier way or a softer part of life, it frightens you, right? Because it doesn't feel normal. It's not comfortable.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was getting at. And I think that I mean even the music is becoming a musician that gets to tour even at a small level. I don't know. Maybe people know this, maybe they don't. Like that's like you know very very low percentage of people ever get to accomplish that. Ever get to tour even in their hometown, let alone in the country or worldwide. So, I mean
Sure.
that is. It just sounds like everything about your background is about tenacity and just like working, obviously some significant amount of talent as well, but like it all requires tremendously hard work. And you said that when you started on the drilling rigs, like that is that when you sort of switch did you switch to that where you felt like, okay, work focuses me? How did that, I guess, how did that time in your life sort of come to pass?
Yeah. So I was fresh out of getting into a lot of trouble. I had some relatives close to me that let's rewind a little bit. Coming from the environment that I came from, rock bottom, zero, financial, anything, I very quickly learned that breaking the law was one way that you could achieve any kind of prosperity in that environment, right? And so I had gotten into a lot of trouble. And then while I was doing my juvenile time or whatever, some relatives close to me got into a lot of trouble. Like they went away, and I came to recognize that that wasn't an option. Like I already knew that, but while I was sitting there, and the moment I found out my sister caught a 12-year sentence, and her then boyfriend uh, caught a 30-year sentence, I was like, I can never do that again. I have to figure something else out. What is the option? And luckily, in the area that I grew up in, which was Grand Junction, Colorado, there's a booming oil and gas industry, and that is an industry where you can start at the bottom making a very good wage because you're risking your life and limb,
Yeah.
but you can move up the ranks pretty quickly and you can make some good money. Like when you do things and you do some illegal stuff and you see the reward, it's really hard to be inspired to go work at McDonald's, right?
Yeah.
And so the oil and gas industry offered me, I think from 18 on, like I made almost six figures, right? Like I made $80,000 that first year. And
Mhm.
that was kind of the norm. And so anything else wasn't acceptable because I was, I was always chasing this success coming from somewhere that there was no idea of success. I was trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you're 18 or a younger, older, some when you're young, a lot of the concept of success is just like how much money do I make in my job, and
Absolutely.
I mean $80,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people, let alone an 18-year-old, you know, starting their first career. So I knew vaguely that I've heard people say that before, that working in the oil rigging industry, you can make a lot of money, but yes, there's risk and involved. I did not know it was you could start out that way as an 18-year-old. Had I known, I might have followed that path as an
Right.
18-year-old. That's good money. But when you so I mean, you saw the family members around you getting into trouble. You managed to decide that's not the path for you.
Hmm.
What how was music in your life before that? I'm a huge music fan, and so I'm if I'm harping on this part of it too much, definitely let me know. But
No,
I
no.
feel like
Music's a big part of the story, and yeah, like I came disenfranchised, right? And hip hop music specifically, especially during that time, was budding, and those stories were relatable, right? Like I came from an environment where my father, he lived, he took my mom hostage and then got shot and then died in jail, and feast or famine, and so those stories in the hip hop songs, like that all made sense to me. Like I recognized, I seen the familiarity to it, and so that's what compelled me. And then when I played my first show and experienced energy transfer from the fans and back to myself, I was hooked. And then when I played my first show out of town, I was like, wait, I can see the world this way. Now I'm no longer this kid from this weird place that had this weird background. I'm this artist can go and share in the world, wherever I go.
yeah, yeah, and I think that the the struggles that we face, for better or worse, I think can actually be very impactful in the musical world. Like, having an artistic
Hmm.
outlet for those things, I think it makes you relatable, but I also think it's a constructive way to deal with kind of the things that you experienced and faced, and be able to actually uh, put pen to paper. People use different medium, but whether it's music or writing or whatever, painting, that people use those outlets to help themselves, kind of deal with some of the struggles. And I think for me, the reason that why music's always been so important to me. I mean, I did the whole garage band thing. I loved it, but I
Hmm.
didn't do anything with it. We didn't like, we played a few shows locally, but like it was never,
Yeah,
we weren't going around touring. But it was really meaningful to me. I just liked,
absolutely.
I liked the power of music, and I've always gravitated towards music that has, I like lyrics. I like hip hop. I like lyrics because of the story behind it, right? And so
Hmm.
that was always a big part of it for me. And so taking that and using it as a career path, and it really works, I guess, well with the schedule that you had
Hmm.
on the oil rig industry, that 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It allows you some free time to focus on one or the other. And the funny enough, like a lot of people that I've met from that have worked in the oil rig industry have been from the real estate industry, and the reason why is because they had those 2 weeks off, and they they put it to use and like started investing in real estate, learning about that. So it's like it seems to be conducive to allowing people to develop like an actual meaningful side hustle,
Absolutely.
whatever it is. So I mean, frankly, like, didn't mean this to be a pitch for that industry, but really, like, young people having the ability to make that much money and have time if they use it wisely, like that's a real opportunity there to get, kind of get yourself headed in the right direction. I think is just a smart path.
Yeah, it's a great tool to explore ideas and grow a real estate concept or as a musician or really anything.
Yeah. So you sort of made that transition over time to nightclubs. I mean, what was, I guess, how did that look from are are you still working in the oil rig industry or not at all?
For a large portion of it. So I you know I was working on the drilling rig, which essentially you're almost a pirate, right? Like you're rough and tumble, you're rolling in the bars and all that stuff. You're living pretty wild while you're on the rig. And most guys or girls that are in that industry, the 2 weeks on the rig is when they kind of cut loose and they're working on the rig at night, and then and then at home they have that real estate business or whatever. For
Yeah.
me, I was a musician and I had a lot of demons locked in me, and so being on the road 100 days a year, where you're expected to be the life of the party, and at that time, the only way you know how to be the life of the party is to participate in the party,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it just started wearing on me mentally, emotionally, spiritually, where I was out on the rig, kind of living a little too fast. And then, as a musician touring, I was also living faster than I wanted to. And the balance wasn't there. There was an opportunity for me to move to LA and really, really pursue the music. It was doing well. We were charting in Europe. And, I came back to Denver to deal with a storage unit, and I met a girl, and I became interested in that. I developed that friendship into a relationship, and long story short, that's my wife now.
Yeah.
And so that was how I lost interest in love for the touring, but I had been booking and promoting my own tours, and I started doing that for other up and coming artists, and I knew how to do that. So once I decided I didn't want to be on the road anymore myself, I started first routing tours for people, and then I just started throwing my own parties, right? Like, the biggest problem most bars face is getting humans through the door. And once I knew that, I was like, oh, I can solve that problem pretty easily because I've already had to figure that out. And my parties were doing well, we're having fun with it. Uh, and then when I'm on the rig, I came to like hate it, right? Because I have this connection with the world when I'm not on the rig, whether it's with my family or I'm throwing these parties and they're going well and it's exciting. And then I'm like on this island in the middle of Wyoming where I'm just counting down seconds to get back out there to throw parties and be involved in this sense of community, you know?
Yeah. No, makes sense. So you I guess I want to make sure I get the timeline right. I know you said it was right before COVID that you decided to get sober.
Yeah.
The how I guess timing, how did that tie into like the jobs, the career paths, I guess, from a
Yeah,
time?
sure. So I made the transition from working in the oil field and throwing parties to like being involved in the nightlife full time in about, I think it was 2014 was when I walked away from the oil and gas industry. And at that time, I had thrown enough parties in the city. I had a really good understanding of the landscape. And so I had a venue that I had already been working with previously. And I was just like, I don't really have any real experience to hire me. And I promise you, I will outwork everybody you know. And, you know, they didn't realize what that really meant. And so they brought me on as a code check person, honestly. I started as code check. And within 3 days, I was a bar back. Within 6 months, I'm managing the back of house stuff as a bar back. And then it just went there. So 2014, 15 is when I stepped in there full time. And then, from 2000, we'll say 15, because it was October 2014. And so 2015, I'm kind of back of house running things. I'm working as a bar back, a bar manager, a promoter. Um, and then, just over time, more responsibility, more responsibility. I remember one time I was taking my wife and me and my wife and daughter were going to Disneyland, and I hadn't done a trip like that in a long time because I was so locked into what I was doing. I was giving the general manager some warning, like, hey, I'm gonna be out of town for these 4 days. It's kind of right during the weekend. I just want to give you the heads up. And he's like, he turns to his assistant and he's like, hey, we need to schedule 4 people to come in and cover. Because at that time, I'm covering that much. I come from the oil and gas industry where you work really hard, you work long hours. So I have a strong back. And I brought that to the nightclub space and, did what I could with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, work ethic just, I mean, work ethic translates across industries, right? It's people, I think sometimes people think they work hard, but yeah, you showed what that really means when it comes to working hard. And so do you own these currently? Do you own any of the nightclubs, or you're managing?
No. So the nightclubs, it's a, it's a family ran business owned by one of the family members. He owns the buildings and businesses. And in time, he kind of took on like a mentor role and I was,
Yeah.
working through him. But no, I'm just like, I'm the general manager of the company. And it's like, it's a general manager role, like in the old school term of it, right? Like I oversee everything at the 5 nightclubs.
Right. Okay. The the first book came out in 2020, or you wrote it in 2020? To give me that time frame.
No, I started thinking about it, right? I started researching, looking around, figuring that process out. And it was a little later. I wrote it. I think 2022 or 2020. Yeah. I wrote it in 2022. And I was already kind of set in this general manager role. And uh, there was a couple of things that led to me writing the book. One was people kept asking me how I was able to get to the level of success that I was functioning at, and then on the other side, I was, when I started thinking about writing the book, I had been navigating my own version of drugs and alcohol issues, being in the club industry, and before that, I'd never really slayed that demon, and I had ran into some articles and interviews of people that wrote their story down as like a therapeutic way to
Mhm.
get through that. And I decided that it would be helpful for me to get it out of me, but it would also be helpful for others that were just compelled by the story and looking to transcend the situation they were presently in.
Yeah, people. I think sometimes we might be afraid to share our story, especially when there's struggle within. But at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of people going through struggles, and you sharing your story, I'm sure has helped a lot of people to read that as well.
Well, and there's like a small segue in there that, kind of also was part of writing the book, which was during COVID, my bars eventually had to shut down and I had a lot of time on my hands and I'm rebuilding bicycles. I'm, doing things around the house and my wife and daughter are still in school and or working remotely. And I'm just making noise to them. They're like, bro, get out of here with all this noise. And so I thought about doing Lyft and Uber, but never had. And so I just pulled the trigger during COVID. Like, oh, I'm just gonna drive for Uber or drive for Lyft and see what that's about. And so I start doing that. And in doing that, some of it you're like a tour guide, and some of it you don't talk at all. But
Yeah.
often you run into people that are really up against the wall and struggling, like within.
Yeah.
And I ran into some of these situations where I had the answers to their problems, or at least I could put them on a path and help them get information. And I did that enough times. I was like, yo, like, let me just write this stuff down. And that was another part of why I wrote the book. Like, there's a story in the book where it's during a blizzard. I'm doing Lyft and I picked this girl up and she's got a young baby with her. And, it was it was a 2-part ride where we were taking her to drop off her son with her aunt and then to Amazon to work. And while I'm riding with her, she's telling me about, the dad's never met the baby. She's working 3 jobs, 18 hours a day, barely surviving at her wits end. By the time she does get home, she's too exhausted to really even give her son this, bundle of joy any real attention. And in that ride, like, I almost pulled over, but we were going so slow, I was able to like really dive into that and like give her some side hustles and some game opportunities just from what I know in the world. by the end of the ride, we're both crying. It's emotional. And, I ended up staying in touch with her, and we helped get her onto a path where she's doing, spending less time with work so she can, be with her son more. And that moment and moments like that were also a catalyst to writing the first book and really the second book, right? Like this opportunity to use some of the hardships and struggles I've experienced to help people that come from where I come from to find a real footing in the world. And that's kind of where the ghetto Tony Robbins thing came from.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think you could have worse nicknames, I guess. So the second book. So the second book's called Unleash the Hustle Within.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the first book was kind of telling your story, and then your second book I mean, please tell me, how you consider them, but is it almost like a coaching type of scenario where, you as you helped this woman in the Lyft ride, like helping people take actionable steps?
It is. The first book, it ended up being somewhat memoir-ishy with some tips and tricks that are stuck in there. And then people were like, man, I love that book, but how do we get actionable success? Like how you,
Yeah.
a guy that dropped out of high school in the ninth grade, a thing I didn't say is I had my first daughter when I was 14, right? And that was an oh shit moment where I had to figure out how to make money. And so the first book was good, but what I found from readers was they wanted to go deeper into actionable things that can lead you to success. And so the second book, it, you know, I talk about and quote some inspirational authors that helped me on my journey. And then I give some of the low hanging fruit, uh, to success, right? What, within the company I work, one of the top people came up to me and we were talking about this, that, or whatever. And she was like, what you do really well is you take very complicated things and you simplify them in a way that anybody can understand it. And so that's what I've tried to do with the book is just like, give people some access to some information that can help them on to the course of real success, whatever that is for them.
Yeah. I think that's a tremendous skill. I think because I think a lot of industries, like they want to have their own languages almost.
Mm-hmm.
It's English, but like they want to have their own terminology and acronyms and all this stuff. Almost, it feels like sometimes almost to make it feel like an exclusive club that like some people don't
Mm-hmm.
know about. But then what that does is it creates this barrier for people to find opportunities for themselves. And so being able to take those things, because like most of life is really pretty simple if you just sort of
Yeah.
boil it down, right? It's like work
If you
hard.
if you allow it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like work hard, be a good person. Like I mean, there's like some simple things that get overcomplicated, and it's like the ability to make something simple for other people, and then create sort of actionable steps within that simplistic plan. That's what people need, right? Like it's like if someone's struggling financially and you're going to hand them the IRS tax code and be like, no, look, you can take advantage of these things. Okay, they can, but it's like that's not really applicable for most people to break that down and figure out how. And so you got to be able to explain the things in a way that people can see it in their future, like actually make it something that they can envision themselves doing.
Absolutely. And a great description or reference would be like the cheat code, right? Like we all kind of grew up playing video games. And I remember one that was popular when I was young, which was Contra. And I still remember the cheat code, up, down, left, right, A, B, start, right?
Yeah.
We all know that. But that ideology can be applied to everything, right? Like there's a simpler way to get what you're looking for if you take the time to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. It does it. Yeah. You still work hard as a part of this. You unleash the hustle like that. That is still certainly a part of it. But like there's some simple steps that anyone can take to change their life, right? It like little bits at a
Hedge your
time.
bets for sure.
Yeah, it's there's definitely ways to go. So the um second book is out, right? And we have, do you have plans for more? Do you enjoy the writing as a another way to
That's a
release?
funny thing. Like even the book writing process, I simplified. Like I found a way to write books in a way that's not so time consuming, that are authentic for me. And so yeah, this particular book rollout, I put a lot of energy into it. So I wrote it a year ago, and we did certain things to make it a little more available. It's on Audible, it's on all the things. But really in the book and talking, like my approach to everything is like, how do we simplify this? Like, how do we make it easier? Like I can right now tell you a very simple way that you yourself could write a book in 1 to 2 weeks.
That seems fast, but it seems
Well,
like it would be hard.
if you have the stories living in you and the subject matter, and you want to express those, you can write a list. Let's say uh, 10 to 15 bullet points, right? Those would end up being chapters, but that's the topics you want to cover. And then you have somebody, uh, interview you, and you tell them,
Yeah.
hey, I want to do 1 to 2 hours on each topic, right? You record that interview, right? And you do that for 15 topics. Before you know it, you have 20, 25 hours worth of audio that with today's technology, you can then transcribe into text, right?
Yeah, that's
And
true.
so now you have this large volume of your opinions that you can sculpt right through. Let's say you get like one of the reader apps that can read back to you what you put in it, right? You put that book in there, and you're now listening to your 20 hours of text, right? And you can in real time from your phone start sculpting this idea, right? This thought.
Yeah.
And you do that enough times, you run through it for a couple weeks. Before you know it, you have a book.
Yeah. 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 The
And that's a rudimentary description of my process, but that's how I've conquered that problem, and that's the way I try to approach problems. Is how do we do this my way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a lot of, it's just business in general, right? It's like simplifying tasks, creating systems, building processes that make it easier. You don't often hear it referred to in terms of, writing a book or what, but like the reality is that, why not, right? Like some of the most prolific authors out there, I forget who this was, but I heard this story about like it's some author that like everybody's heard of, and they have probably hundreds of books, and it was basically like, yeah, they didn't write any of their books themselves. They like, it's like a, essentially, like you said, like stories being transcribed, and it's like they're a tremendously famous successful author, and like they developed a system around writing books so that they could,
Absolutely.
be uh, function at that level, sort of created a business out of it. But it's still like, it doesn't mean that those books, they're like tremendously popular and entertaining and all of that. So it's like people think if you put a system on it, uh, it can't be a creative process. It can't be something entertaining. But I don't think that's at all the case. Like one of the things I always, people ask you like, if you ever get to meet your heroes, like what would you ask them? And for me, a lot of what I want to ask like the people that would be on my list is, what was your process? Like when I was really big into music, I was like a huge
Hmm.
Pearl Jam fan, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to Eddie Vedder and ask them how they wrote songs. That's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to know, because it's like, it's not, there is a process. Everybody has a process of some sort. It's not
Hmm.
like Taylor Swift does not tour all year round and put out album after album after album without some level of processes in
Hmm.
in place to do that. Like it's just, there's, I think that like if you look at the people that are really successful, like that's what just doing just what you said. They're
Yep.
simplifying the process so that they can do what they love to do at scale. Like I think it's just that simple.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're looking for this information, it's there, but I feel like a lot of disenfranchised people don't know where to look, and the way I move in the world, it lends itself to communicating this language to people that aren't necessarily looking for it, but when they stumble on it, it's helpful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then on the flip side, I remember being with a very wealthy, ridiculous seven figures real estate guy, and he had read my book, and he was like, bro, he's like, it was like you were talking to me, like the way that you write, it's almost a conversation, which I mean, I just talked about my process, and that was a compliment for me, right? Like, I want the reader to feel like they know me, that they understand it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's that's the same with music or book, right? Like when people write songs, the idea is that you're connecting to the audience, right? Like that's why most people listen to music, is because it makes them feel something from their,
Yep.
and that feeling of something is from like their own lives, right? It's like you can connect to that person because whatever they're singing or that melody like brings you to something in your own life, and
It
it
speaks to you.
yeah, yeah. So it's just, I mean, that's and that you can still have that even with a process in place. So it's just I think being able to combine simplifying processes in life into a relatable way, like that's I mean a skill that can't be beat. It's very, very powerful. So it's pretty cool. Tullie, I want to make sure I get to ask you the questions I ask every guest, and so I'm going to switch gears. The first question is always, it's based on the name of the show, being Know Your Why, and so I like to ask every guest, what is your why? The sort of the driver. You have a really interesting and diverse background. Kind of what keeps you motivated to keep going.
My why has changed over the years. The why I toured was because I wanted to see the world, and music was that avenue, that vehicle for me. When I play a show in Paris, I was staying with the promoters, and they were opening me up to their world. But as time has gone on, the why has shifted, and these days I like serving people. I'm in the service industry, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of reverence there. Like, people are coming into a restaurant or a bar or whatever, a show, to transcend their day to day life. They're using it as a tool to like help them get through the things that they're not excited about.
Yeah.
And having experienced that time and time again, I recognize the service that we all need, and this next chapter of my life, it's weird. Like, I'm at like a really I'm at another fork in the road, similar when I joined the club industry, and yeah, the why is just serving people, just having the ability, like that girl in that Lyft, to give her information, give her game, that hopefully propels her to a place where she can live a more comfortable life. So these days, it's the why is to serve people.
Yeah. No, that's and I think that I think that's fairly obvious just in the short time that we've been talking. I think that's fairly obvious that that's who you are. So I have no doubt, and go on to continue to serve people.
Mm.
Um, when people hear this and they want to connect, they want to reach out, what's the best way?
Uh, so my name, it's spelled Tullie Bailey. That's all my Instagrams and LinkedIn. It's also a website. So fortunately, having a unique name has lent itself to me being able to capture all the IP.
Yeah, yeah. It does help to have a name that nobody else has. Like there's the I mean, Jason's not an uncommon name, but there's pretty much every Balara is in my family. So you're not going to go out and find another Jason Balara and get us
Yeah.
confused when you go do a search. So it does help to have
Sure.
a unique name. Oftentimes the final question I ask people is it's usually surrounding business or real estate and about getting started. But I'm very intrigued by that conversation you had with the woman in the Lyft and
Yeah.
helping her, like, coming from the situation that you described. I mean, would you share? You don't have to give details, and I don't. I'm just kind of intrigued by what you told her that like helped her. Where did you start with her? I guess is what
You
I'm
know,
asking.
it's funny. We touched on it briefly in like business language earlier. The low hanging fruit is just some of these side hustles that exist. Like my mom couldn't do Lyft or Uber Eats, but if she was able to, that could have given her a little more income that would have helped us get out of our
Yeah.
situation. You know, at that time, that girl was, she was working at Amazon. She was working at like a dispensary, and she was working at a store in the mall. And I just explained to her, like, here's what it's costing you to do those things. If you put together an LLC and tap into some of these other vehicles, you can generate more revenue, or you can generate revenue from your home where you can also be with your child more. And that was some of what we talked about. But I still drive Lyft to this day because it's a great tool to just get into universes that you wouldn't otherwise get into. And there was a guy that was serious about gambling, and he couldn't explain to his wife how important it was and the level that he was gaming at. And I was like, well, have you thought about creating a brand around what your gaming is? Like, you're competing in these competitive arenas. Why not create a blah, blah, blah and put together a t-shirt store and like a whole thing?
Yeah.
I think that's going to show your wife that you're not just trying to hang out outside of your family,
Right.
and you're really passionate about what you're trying to do. And hopefully these things can help you earn a little more money as your fan base grows.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to me, like, the take home message is just letting people know what's available, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
what do you have? What do you have now? What's your situation now? What do you have to offer? What's your skill set? What are what are you comfort with people? What is your time schedule? That kind of thing. And then here are the options that are available to you, because there's so many now. Like, there's so many, there's so much gig economy. There's ways to, I've never driven for Lyft or Uber. It's a very intriguing option to me in terms of, like, I've ridden in them, and I remember one, like, I'll never forget this guy. Like, he was just I don't know, it's probably 70 or 80, and he was
Hmm.
like, I just retired, 2 years ago. My wife doesn't want me in the house as much as I've been in the house, so I go on this so I can talk to people. And like,
Yeah.
he just like taking a ride to the airport. He would chatted the whole time. Like, I met a guy in one that was he would we both play soccer. He was also like 70, and he's like, I actually had a hip replacement and was able to go back and play soccer again, like, after that. Like, and it was just like, really learn a lot. And I imagine as a driver, you're going to have the same, like, you can have those conversations with the passengers and, like, really learn a lot and help each other. So it really is kind of a fascinating option in terms of almost like networking.
Yeah. You open like I said, you get to tap into other people's universe, and they get to tap into your universe
Yeah.
in realms where you normally wouldn't tap, right? Like, the only reason we're connecting is because you're in my car and I'm taking you somewhere.
Right.
But because of that, like I've had in-depth conversations with Ted Turner's attorney. She was in town doing like a surprise visit to his restaurants in Denver. And before I knew it, we're talking about this, that, and the third, and we connected. I got her email, and we built that. Another all the way to the guy that was helping work on the video game thing.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can learn about people if you open yourself up to, and what people can learn about you, and how rich your life can be if
Yeah.
we do that.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. That for me, that's actually a lot of what this podcast has been. Just like getting to meet people, hear their story. Like I hope that this is providing value to people that listen, but ultimately, like if it one person hears it and they're like, I really need to connect with Tully, like that would be amazing. Like I just think there's so much opportunity available, and it's just letting people know that it is available. So I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time and sharing all that you did. This is super enjoyable for me. I think people are going to love it. So thank you for coming and being on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me be on your podcast, and I want to assure you that what you're doing is helpful in creating these vehicles for people to be on the podcast and people to watch the podcast. It's good. It's good for us.
Yeah, thank you, folks listening. Make sure you connect with Tully. Super interesting. We'll have all of his. Easy to find. Search Tullie Bailey, but we'll put all that in the show notes as well. The links to your socials and website. And please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. Thank you all so much for listening. Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?